The police sirens wailed through the empty parking garage as Marcus Wellington stood frozen beside his Rolls-Royce, watching federal agents pour into his building like ants invading a picnic. His hands shook as he gripped his phone, staring at the single text message that had arrived 60 seconds ago. "It's all gone. The board voted. You're out. Security is coming." 48 years old. $3 billion. 22,000 employees. All of it vanishing like smoke in the wind. And the strangest part? Marcus couldn't make a sound. Not a word. Not a scream. Nothing. His voice had simply stopped working. He opened his mouth, tried to yell, tried to cry out, but only silence came. Complete, terrifying silence. The doctors would later call it psychogenic muteness, a condition where extreme shock steals your ability to speak. But right now, in this moment, as flashlights swept across the garage and footsteps echoed closer, Marcus Wellington could only stand there, voiceless, watching his empire crumble. But how did the most powerful CEO in America end up here, unable to speak, losing everything? To understand that, we need to go back. Back to where it all started to fall apart. 3 months earlier, Marcus Wellington woke up at 4:30 in the morning, just like he did every single day. His penthouse apartment stretched across the entire top floor of the Millennium Tower, with windows that looked out over the sparkling city below. Everything in his home was perfect. The marble floors were so shiny you could see your reflection. The furniture cost more than most people's houses. Even his coffee maker was flown in from Italy and cost $40,000. Marcus stood in front of his bathroom mirror, straightening his tie. It was made of silk and cost $1,200. He had 147 ties just like it, each a different color, organized in his closet by shade. His suit was custom-made, fitted perfectly to his body. His watch cost more than a luxury car. He looked at himself and smiled. This was success. This was winning. "Looking good, Marcus," he whispered to his reflection. "Another day. Another $1 million. He grabbed his briefcase, made from genuine crocodile leather, and headed to his private elevator. Regular people had to share elevators with their neighbors, but not Marcus Wellington. He had his own elevator that went straight from his penthouse to his private parking spot in the basement. He never had to see anyone he didn't want to see. His driver, James, was already waiting beside the Rolls-Royce. James had worked for Marcus for 8 years, driving him every single day. But Marcus couldn't remember the last time he'd actually looked at James's face or asked him how he was doing. James was just there. Like the car, like the leather seats, just another thing that Marcus owned. "Good morning, Mr. Wellington," James said, opening the door. Marcus grunted and climbed into the back seat, already pulling out his phone. He had 347 unread emails from the night before. His company, Wellington Tech Industries, was worth $12 billion. They made computer chips that went into phones, tablets, and computers all over the world. Marcus owned 45% of the company, which made him very, very rich. But here's the thing about Marcus Wellington. He wasn't always a billionaire. He grew up poor, really poor, in a tiny apartment with his mom and dad. His father worked 3 jobs just to pay the rent. His mother cleaned houses during the day and worked at a diner at night. Marcus remembered eating bread and butter for dinner because that's all they could afford. He remembered wearing shoes with holes in them. He remembered the way the other kids at school laughed at his worn-out clothes. So when Marcus got a scholarship to study computer science at college, he promised himself something. He promised that he would never be poor again, never be weak again, never let anyone look down on him again. He would become so rich, so powerful, that nobody could ever hurt him. And he did it. He built Wellington Tech from nothing, working 100-hour weeks, sleeping in his office, eating cold pizza for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He made his first million at 28, his first billion at 39. By the time he turned 45, he was one of the richest people in America. But something happened along the way. Marcus forgot where he came from. He forgot what it felt like to be hungry, to be scared, to need help. He started to think he was better than other people, smarter, more important. He stopped seeing people as people. Instead, he saw them as tools, things to use, workers to make money for him, numbers on a spreadsheet. His employees were terrified of him. If someone made a mistake, Marcus would fire them on the spot, right in front of everyone else. He once fired a woman because she brought him the wrong kind of coffee. He fired a man because he spoke too quietly during a meeting. People whispered that Marcus Wellington had ice water in his veins instead of blood. Even his own board of directors, the powerful people who helped run the company, were afraid of him. Well, most of them. There was one person who wasn't afraid. One person who wanted Marcus gone. His name was Richard Chen, and he was the vice president of Wellington Tech. Richard smiled and nodded during meetings, but behind Marcus's back, he was planning something terrible. That morning, as Marcus's Rolls-Royce pulled up to the Wellington Tech building, a massive tower of glass and steel that stretched 50 stories into the sky, Marcus had no idea what was coming. He stepped out of the car, buttoned his suit jacket, and walked through the front entrance. Every employee he passed looked down at the floor. Nobody made eye contact. Nobody dared to smile or say hello. They just moved out of his way, like he was a king walking through his castle. The only person who did look at him was an old man pushing a cleaning cart near the elevators. He was maybe 70 years old, with white hair, warm brown eyes, and a gentle smile. He wore a simple gray uniform with a name tag that said, Henry. He was one of the night janitors, just finishing his shift. "Good morning, sir," Henry said, his voice kind and friendly. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" Marcus didn't even glance at him. He walked right past, pressed the elevator button, and stared at his phone. To Marcus, Henry didn't exist. He was invisible, just another nobody. But Henry watched Marcus step into the elevator with sad eyes, like he could see something Marcus couldn't see, like he knew something bad was coming. Marcus's office was on the 50th floor, the very top of the building. It was enormous, bigger than most people's entire apartments. One wall was entirely made of glass, giving him a view of the whole city. His desk was made from a single piece of black marble. His chair cost $18,000 and was designed by a famous Italian designer. Everything in the room screamed one message: I am powerful. I am important. I am better than you. Marcus sat down and immediately started working. He had meetings scheduled every 30 minutes, from 7 in the morning until 7 at night. Meetings with engineers, meetings with investors, meetings with lawyers. He shouted at people when they didn't have answers. He slammed his fist on the desk when numbers weren't high enough. He made a young woman cry because her presentation had a typo on slide 17. By lunchtime, Marcus had fired 3 people and made 12 others think they might be fired tomorrow. His assistant, a nervous young man named David, knocked quietly on the door at noon. "Mr. Wellington, your lunch is here. Bring it in," Marcus barked, not looking up from his computer. David hurried in with a tray. Sushi from the most expensive Japanese restaurant in the city. It cost $450 for this one meal. Marcus ate it without tasting it, still typing emails, still making phone calls, still working. "Will you need anything else, sir?" David asked. "No. Get out." David practically ran from the office. Marcus didn't notice the way David's hands were shaking. He didn't notice that David looked exhausted and scared. He didn't care. In Marcus's world, people were either useful or they weren't. And if they weren't useful, they could be replaced. What Marcus didn't know was that at that exact moment, 3 floors below him, Richard Chen was sitting in a conference room with 6 members of the board of directors. They were looking at documents, financial documents, secret documents, documents that showed Marcus Wellington had been making some very bad decisions with the company's money. Now, Marcus hadn't stolen anything. He hadn't broken any laws. But he had taken huge risks, dangerous risks, betting millions and millions of dollars on projects that might fail. If those projects failed, Wellington Tech could lose everything. The board of directors were responsible for protecting the company, and they were starting to think that Marcus Wellington was too dangerous to lead anymore. "He's out of control," Richard Chen said, sliding papers across the table. "These investments are insane. If even one of them fails, we could lose $2 billion. That's 2 billion with a B." The board members looked at each other nervously. "But Marcus built this company," one of them said. "He's the reason we're all rich." "He was the reason," Richard replied, his eyes cold. "But that was years ago. Now he's a liability. A bomb waiting to explode. We need to remove him before he destroys everything we've built." "Remove him? You mean fire him?" another board member whispered. "Can we even do that?" Richard smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a snake. "According to the company bylaws, if 75% of the board votes that the CEO is putting the company at unacceptable risk, we can remove him immediately. I've done the math. I've talked to each of you privately. We have the votes." The room went silent. These were powerful people, rich people, important people. But the idea of firing Marcus Wellington, the man who seemed unstoppable, made them all afraid. "When?" someone finally asked. "Soon," Richard said. "Very soon. I just need a little more evidence. One more mistake. One more bad decision. Then we strike." Marcus Wellington worked until 8 o'clock that night, long after everyone else had gone home. The building was empty and quiet. Just the hum of computers and the distant sound of vacuum cleaners as the night janitors started their shift. Marcus finally stood up, stretched, and grabbed his coat. Another successful day. Another day of being powerful, important, in control. He walked to the elevator and pressed the button. When the elevator doors opened, he stepped inside and found himself face to face with that same old janitor from the morning, Henry. He was inside the elevator, mopping the floor. "Oh, excuse me, sir," Henry said with that same gentle smile. "Just finishing up. I'll be out of your way in 1 second." Henry said, "I was self-com too. I was self-to money and way, and are, and where, with make and unmortar. Done. That, and where, that in one." Marcus sighed heavily, annoyed. He didn't want to wait. He didn't want to share his elevator with a janitor. But Henry was already stepping out, pulling his cleaning cart with him. As Marcus pressed the button for the lobby, Henry turned back and said something that Marcus would remember forever, even though he didn't understand it at the time. "Mr. Wellington, can I tell you something my grandmother used to say?" Marcus looked up, irritated. "What?" "She used to say that a man who stands on a mountain of gold but has nobody to share the view with is lonelier than a man with nothing but warm hands to hold." Marcus stared at him. What was this old man talking about? Mountains of gold? Warm hands? It sounded like nonsense. "That's nice," Marcus said coldly. "Now move your cart. You're blocking the door." Henry nodded and stepped back. The elevator doors closed. But as Marcus rode down to the parking garage, alone in the quiet elevator, Henry's words echoed in his mind. Why had the old man said that? What did it mean? Marcus shook his head. It didn't matter. It was just the rambling of an old janitor, meaningless words from a meaningless person. He had no idea that in exactly 72 hours, his entire world would explode. His company would turn against him. His voice would disappear. And that old janitor would become the most important person in his life. The Rolls-Royce pulled out of the parking garage. Marcus stared at his phone, already planning tomorrow's meetings, tomorrow's deals, tomorrow's victories. But tomorrow would bring something Marcus Wellington never expected. Tomorrow would bring the beginning of the end. The next morning started like every other morning. Marcus woke at 4:30, drank his expensive Italian coffee, put on another $1,200 tie, and rode down in his private elevator. But when he stepped into the back seat of the Rolls-Royce, James, the driver, looked worried. "Mr. Wellington, I heard something this morning that— I don't pay you to talk, Marcus snapped. I pay you to drive. So drive. James's mouth closed. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as he pulled out into the early morning traffic. In the rearview mirror, Marcus could see James's eyes, and they looked sad. But Marcus didn't care. He was already reading emails, already thinking about his first meeting, already living inside his own head where only money and power mattered. When they arrived at Wellington Tech headquarters, something felt different. Marcus couldn't quite put his finger on it, but the air seemed strange, heavy, like the moment before a thunderstorm, when everything goes quiet and still. He walked through the lobby, and instead of people looking down at the floor like usual, they were whispering to each other. When Marcus walked past, the whispers stopped. People stared at him with weird expressions. Some looked scared, some looked excited, like they knew something he didn't know. Marcus felt a tiny flutter of worry in his stomach, but he pushed it away. He was Marcus Wellington. Nothing could touch him. The elevator ride to the 50th floor seemed longer than usual. When the doors finally opened, his assistant David was standing right there, looking pale and terrified. "Mr. Wellington, I need to tell you something." "Later," Marcus said, rushing past him. "I have the quarterly review meeting in 10 minutes. Did you print the reports?" "Sir, please, you don't understand. I said later." Marcus stormed into his office and slammed the door. He sat down at his marble desk and opened his laptop. That's when he saw it. An email from Richard Chen with the subject line, "Emergency Board Meeting. Your attendance required. 9 a.m. Marcus frowned. Emergency meeting? He hadn't called an emergency meeting. As CEO, he was the only one who could call emergency meetings. This didn't make sense. He looked at the clock. 8:57. The meeting was in 3 minutes. In the big conference room on the 48th floor, Marcus stood up, grabbed his phone, and headed for the elevator. His heart was beating a little faster now. Something was wrong. Very wrong. When he entered the conference room, all 12 members of the board of directors were already sitting there. Richard Chen sat at the head of the table, in the chair where Marcus usually sat. That was Marcus's chair. Nobody sat in Marcus's chair. "Richard, what's going on?" Marcus demanded. "Why wasn't I informed about this meeting?" Richard looked up with that snake smile. "Oh, but you were informed, Marcus. I sent you an email 3 minutes ago." 3 minutes? That's not how we do things. I'm the CEO of this company. I call the meetings. I set the agenda. Now, someone better tell me. "Sit down, Marcus," said Gloria Martinez, the oldest member of the board. Her voice was cold and hard. Marcus felt ice water pour through his veins. Nobody talked to him like that. Nobody told him to sit down in his own company. "Excuse me? I said sit down," Gloria repeated. "We have things to discuss." Marcus slowly pulled out a chair and sat. His hands were shaking, but he hid them under the table. Around the room, the board members wouldn't meet his eyes. They all stared at the papers in front of them. Richard Chen stood up and pressed a button on the laptop in front of him. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," Richard began. "As you can see from these financial documents, Marcus Wellington has made a series of extremely risky investments over the past 18 months. Project Titan, the Singapore expansion, the quantum computing division. Each one cost between $500 million and $2 billion, and each one is failing." "That's not true," Marcus said, his voice rising. "Those projects need time. They're long-term investments." "Long-term?" Richard laughed. "Marcus, Project Titan has burned through $1.8 billion and hasn't produced a single working product. The Singapore expansion lost $400 million in the first quarter alone. The quantum computing division is 3 years behind schedule and millions over budget. You're gambling with company money like it's a casino." "I built this company," Marcus shouted, slamming his fist on the table. I turned a garage startup into a $12 billion empire. Don't you dare question my decisions." "We're not questioning your past success," Gloria said quietly. "We're questioning your current judgment. Marcus, you've become reckless. You don't listen to anyone anymore. You fire people for asking questions. You make massive financial decisions without consulting the board. You've created a culture of fear where nobody dares to tell you when you're wrong." "Because I'm not wrong." Marcus stood up, his face turning red. "Every one of those projects will succeed. You people don't have vision. You don't understand innovation." "What we understand," Richard said coldly, "is that if even one more of your pet projects fails, this company will lose so much money that we'll have to lay off thousands of employees. Thousands of people will lose their jobs because you can't admit when you've made a mistake." The room went silent. Marcus looked around at the faces of the board members. They all looked away. "What is this?" Marcus whispered. "What's really happening here?" Richard Chen pressed another button. A new document appeared on the screen. Official, legal, scary. "The board of directors has voted," Richard announced. "Effective immediately, you are removed as Chief Executive Officer of Wellington Tech Industries. Security will escort you from the building within the hour. Your personal belongings will be boxed up and delivered to your home. Your company email and access cards have already been deactivated." The words hit Marcus like a punch to the stomach. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be happening. You can't do this," Marcus stammered. "I own 45% of this company. I'm the majority shareholder. You own 45%, Gloria interrupted, "which means 55% is owned by others. And we voted. 9 votes to 3. You're out, Marcus." Marcus felt the room spinning. His vision got blurry around the edges. 9 votes to 3? That meant only 3 people had voted to keep him. 3 out of 12. Almost everyone had betrayed him. "Who?" Marcus asked, his voice breaking. "Who voted against me?" Richard smiled. "Does it matter? It's done." "WHO!" Marcus screamed. Gloria stood up slowly. "I did. Richard did. So did Susan, Paolo, Michael, David, Karen, Ahmed, and Jennifer. The only ones who voted for you were Robert, Linda, and James. 3 people, Marcus. Out of 12 board members, only 3 wanted to keep you." Marcus looked at each face around the table. People he had made rich. People he had trusted. People he thought were his friends. And almost all of them had stabbed him in the back. "You'll regret this," Marcus said, his voice shaking with rage. "I'll sue. I'll fight this. I'll destroy every single one of you." "You can try," Richard said. "But you signed the company bylaws yourself 15 years ago. You gave the board the power to remove you if they felt you were putting the company at risk. This is completely legal. Your lawyers have already been notified." Marcus felt something break inside his chest. Something important. Something that couldn't be fixed. He opened his mouth to scream, to curse, to threaten, to rage against this betrayal. But nothing came out. Not a sound. Not a whisper. Nothing. He tried again. His lips moved, but no words came. His throat worked, but no voice emerged. Panic flooded through him. What was happening? Why couldn't he speak? Richard noticed. His smile got wider. "What's wrong, Marcus? Cat got your tongue?" Marcus grabbed his throat, his eyes wide with fear. He tried to force words out, tried to yell, tried to make any sound at all. But there was only silence. Complete, terrifying silence. "Get him out of here," Richard said, waving his hand like Marcus was garbage. "Security will escort him out. And Marcus, don't come back." The conference room door opened, and 2 security guards walked in. Big men in uniforms. They stood on either side of Marcus. "Sir, we need you to come with us." Marcus wanted to scream at them, wanted to order them to arrest Richard instead, wanted to tell them this was all a mistake, but no sound would come out. His voice was gone, stolen, lost. The guards gently took his arms and led him out of the conference room. Through the glass walls, Marcus could see his employees watching. Some looked shocked. Some looked sad. But some looked relieved, like they were happy he was gone. They took him to his office to collect his personal items. David, his assistant, was already there, putting things in a cardboard box. Pictures, a few books, his expensive pen set. Marcus tried to tell David to stop, to leave everything alone, but only silence came out. He grabbed David's arm, and David jumped back, startled. "Mr. Wellington, I'm sorry," David said, and tears were actually running down his face. "I'm so sorry. I wanted to warn you, but they told me if I said anything, I'd be fired too. I have student loans. I have rent. I couldn't. I'm sorry." Marcus stared at David, this young man who had worked for him for 3 years, who had brought him coffee every morning, who had stayed late helping him prepare for meetings. And Marcus realized with a sickening feeling that he didn't even know if David had a girlfriend, or where he lived, or what his dreams were. Marcus had worked next to this person for 3 years and knew absolutely nothing about him. The security guards were patient. They let Marcus look around his office one last time. The marble desk, the expensive chair, the wall of glass overlooking the city. This had been his kingdom, his empire. And now it was gone. They led him to the elevator. As the doors opened, Marcus saw someone standing inside. It was Henry, the old janitor, cleaning the elevator mirrors with a soft cloth. When Henry saw Marcus's face, saw the security guards, saw the cardboard box of belongings, his expression changed to one of deep sadness. "Oh no," Henry whispered. "Oh, Mr. Wellington." The security guards moved to wait for the next elevator, but Henry held up his hand. "It's okay, fellas, I'm done here. He can ride down." Henry stepped out, but as he passed Marcus, he reached out and squeezed Marcus's shoulder gently. "I'm sorry this happened to you, son. I truly am." Marcus felt tears burning in his eyes. This janitor, this old man he had ignored and dismissed, was the only person in the entire building who seemed genuinely sad for him. The elevator doors closed. Marcus was alone with the 2 guards as they descended from the 50th floor. Down, down, down. With each floor, Marcus felt himself falling further from everything he had been. When they reached the parking garage, James was there with the Rolls-Royce. But Richard Chen had thought of everything. Another security guard was standing next to James. "I'm sorry, Mr. Wellington," the guard said. "The car belongs to the company. James will drive you home this one last time, but then the vehicle needs to be returned." They couldn't even let him keep the car. They were taking everything. Marcus climbed into the back seat. James started driving, and Marcus could see tears running down James's face in the rearview mirror. "I voted to keep you," James suddenly said, his voice choking. "I'm not on the board, but Robert asked me what I thought, and I told him you deserved another chance. I know you probably don't remember, but 8 years ago you gave me this job when nobody else would hire me. I had a criminal record. I'd been to prison for something stupid I did when I was young. But you saw my application, and you said everyone deserves a second chance. You changed my life, Mr. Wellington. You saved my life." Marcus stared at James in shock. He had done that? He didn't remember at all. To him, James had just been a driver, invisible, unimportant. But James remembered. James had been grateful for 8 years. And Marcus had never even said thank you. Fresh tears ran down Marcus's face. He tried to say thank you now, tried to tell James that he was sorry for being so cold, so distant. But no words would come out, only silence. When they pulled up to the Millennium Tower, James got out and opened Marcus's door one last time. "I don't know what's going to happen to you, sir," James said quietly, "but I hope you find what you're looking for. I really do." Then James got back in the Rolls-Royce and drove away. Marcus watched the car disappear around the corner, taking with it the last piece of his old life. The next 3 days were the worst of Marcus Wellington's life. He stayed in his penthouse, alone, unable to speak, watching the news reports about his removal from Wellington Tech. Financial channels discussed his spectacular fall from grace. Business magazines ran articles titled, "The Downfall of Marcus Wellington, a cautionary tale of greed and arrogance." His phone rang constantly. Lawyers, accountants, reporters. But Marcus couldn't answer, couldn't speak. He let the phone ring and ring until finally the battery died and everything went silent. On the 4th day, Marcus realized something terrible. His penthouse rent was paid by the company. His credit cards were company cards. His gym membership, his country club membership, his streaming services, even his grocery deliveries. Everything was connected to Wellington Tech, and they had cut him off from all of it. He checked his personal bank account on his laptop. $234,000. That sounds like a lot of money, and for normal people it is. But Marcus's penthouse cost $50,000 a month in rent. His lifestyle cost another $100,000 a month. He had maybe 2 months before he ran out of money completely. How was this possible? He had been a billionaire. Where did all the money go? Then Marcus understood. His billions weren't cash in a bank. They were stock shares in Wellington Tech, and those shares were now worthless to him. The board had voted to freeze his shares, preventing him from selling them until all the legal issues were resolved. That could take years. And when it was finally resolved, the shares might be worth nothing anyway. He had built a fortune on paper. But in reality, he had nothing. Nothing. Except an expensive apartment he couldn't afford, and a closet full of $1,200 ties. That night, Marcus Wellington stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights below. People were down there, living their lives, going to work, coming home to families, laughing with friends. And Marcus was alone. Completely, utterly alone. When was the last time someone had hugged him? When was the last time he'd had a real conversation with another human being? When was the last time anyone had looked at him and seen a person instead of a bank account? Marcus couldn't remember, and that realization hurt more than losing his company. He thought about Henry's words in the elevator. A man who stands on a mountain of gold but has nobody to share the view with is lonelier than a man with nothing but warm hands to hold. For the first time in his life, Marcus Wellington understood what those words meant. He had spent 30 years climbing to the top of the mountain. And now that he was here, alone at the summit, he realized the mountain meant nothing. The gold meant nothing. None of it meant anything without someone to share it with. His phone was dead. His voice was gone. His company was lost. Marcus Wellington had everything, and now he had nothing. He didn't know what to do, where to go, how to start over. He was 48 years old, and he didn't have a single real friend in the world. That's when Marcus made a decision. A crazy decision that would change everything. He needed to find Henry. The old janitor had shown him kindness when everyone else showed him cruelty. Henry had looked sad for him when everyone else celebrated his fall. Henry's words had stayed with him, echoing in his mind. Maybe Henry could help him. Maybe Henry could teach him something. Maybe Henry knew the secret that Marcus had missed his entire life. But there was a problem. Marcus didn't know Henry's last name. He didn't know where Henry lived. He didn't even know if Henry still worked at Wellington Tech. All Marcus knew was that Henry was an old janitor with white hair, warm eyes, and wisdom that seemed to come from a place deeper than books or money could reach. Finding one janitor in a city of millions would be almost impossible. But Marcus had to try. Because Henry was the only person who had treated him like a human being instead of a monster or a failure. And right now, Marcus Wellington desperately needed to feel human again. The next morning, Marcus put on jeans and a t-shirt. Not a suit, not a tie, just regular clothes. He looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. dark circles under his eyes, face covered in stubble, hair messy and uncombed. He looked broken. He looked lost. He looked like he needed help. Marcus took a taxi to Wellington Tech headquarters because he didn't have a car anymore. The driver tried to make friendly conversation, but Marcus couldn't respond. He just pointed to where he wanted to go, handed over cash, and got out. Standing in front of the building he used to own, Marcus felt small, insignificant. The towers stretched 50 stories into the sky, glass and steel, gleaming in the morning sun. And Marcus Wellington was locked out of it. He walked through the front entrance. The security guard at the desk looked up, did a double take, and his mouth fell open. "Mr. Wellington? Sir, you're not supposed to be." Marcus held up his hands in a peaceful gesture. He pulled out his phone and typed into the Notes app. "I can't speak. I need to find one of the janitors. Old man named Henry, white hair. Please." The security guard read the note, looking confused and suspicious. "Sir." Marcus typed again. "Please, it's important. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just need to talk to Henry." The security guard looked at Marcus's face. Really looked. He saw the desperation there, the sadness, the brokenness, and something in the guard's expression softened. "Henry Okafor," the guard said finally. "That's his full name. He works the night shift, 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. But sir, he's not here now. He won't be back until tonight." Marcus pulled out more money from his wallet, all the cash he had. Maybe $300. He held it out to the guard. The guard looked at the money, then back at Marcus, and shook his head. "Keep your money, sir. I don't want it." Then he wrote something on a piece of paper and slid it across the desk. "This is Henry's home address. He lives about 30 minutes from here. I probably shouldn't give this to you, but—" The guard paused. "Henry's a good man, one of the best people I know. If you're looking for him, you must need help pretty bad. And Henry never turns away someone who needs help." Marcus took the paper with shaking hands. He typed one more message. "Thank you. Good luck, Mr. Wellington," the guard said quietly. "I hope you find what you're looking for." Henry Okafor lived in a neighborhood that Marcus had never visited before. It wasn't fancy. The buildings were old, with paint peeling off the walls. Kids played soccer in the street. Old men sat on stoops, talking and laughing. Music drifted from open windows. It was nothing like Marcus's world of penthouses and private elevators. But there was something here that Marcus's world didn't have. Something warm. Something real. Life. Marcus found the address. A small apartment building, 4 stories tall, with a garden out front where someone had planted tomatoes and flowers. He walked up the steps and found Henry's name on the buzzer. Okafor, 2B. Marcus's finger hovered over the button. What if Henry didn't want to see him? What if Henry thought he was crazy for showing up at his home? What if? Before he could overthink it, Marcus pressed the buzzer. A moment later, a voice crackled through the speaker. Warm, familiar, kind. "Hello? Who's there?" Marcus opened his mouth, tried to speak, but nothing came out. He pressed the buzzer again. "Hello?" Henry's voice said. "Is someone there? If you can hear me, buzz twice for yes." Marcus pressed the button twice. "Are you in trouble?" Marcus hesitated, then pressed twice again. Yes, he was in trouble. The worst trouble of his life. "Okay, I'm coming down. Just hold on." A minute later, the front door opened, and there was Henry. He was wearing a simple cardigan sweater and comfortable pants. His white hair was a bit messy, like maybe he had been napping. But his eyes were bright and alert. When he saw Marcus standing there, Henry's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Mr. Wellington? What in the world are you doing here?" Then Henry saw Marcus's face, saw the pain and desperation there, and his expression changed to concern. "Son, are you okay? Come inside. Come on. Now." Henry put a gentle hand on Marcus's back and guided him into the building. They walked up one flight of stairs, and Henry unlocked his apartment door. The apartment was small, maybe 1/10 the size of Marcus's penthouse, but it was cozy, comfortable. The furniture was old, but well-maintained. Pictures covered every wall. Family photos, children, grandchildren, smiling faces everywhere. Books filled a small bookshelf. The smell of fresh bread drifted from the kitchen. Sit down, Henry said, pointing to a worn armchair. Can I get you some water? Some tea? Marcus sat down and shook his head. He pulled out his phone and typed, I can't speak. I lost my voice. The doctors say it's from shock. Henry read the message and nodded slowly. Psychogenic muteness. My wife had that once, after we lost our son. Took her 3 months to get her voice back. He sat down across from Marcus. They fired you from your company, didn't they? Marcus nodded. And to his shame, tears started rolling down his cheeks. Oh, son, Henry said softly. I'm so sorry. I saw it coming. I could see the way people looked at you, the way they whispered. But I prayed I was wrong. Marcus typed, Why are you being nice to me? I was terrible to you. I ignored you. I treated you like you were invisible. Henry read the message and smiled sadly. You did, and I'll be honest, that hurt. But you know what? I've been hurt before, and I'll be hurt again. That's life. The question isn't whether people hurt you. The question is whether you let that hurt turn you into something bitter and hard, or whether you stay soft and keep your heart open. Marcus typed, I built everything and lost everything. I don't know who I am anymore. Do you want to know what I think? Henry asked. I think maybe you didn't lose everything. I think maybe you lost all the wrong things, and now you have a chance to find the right things. Marcus looked up at Henry, confused. Henry stood up and walked to his bookshelf. He pulled out a photo album and brought it back, sitting next to Marcus. He opened it to the first page. This was my wife, Grace, Henry said, pointing to a picture of a beautiful woman with kind eyes. She died 5 years ago. Cancer. We were married for 42 years. He turned the page. These are my children. Marcus. Yes. He's named Marcus too. And Sarah, and David, and Ruth. 4 beautiful kids. Another page. And these are my grandchildren, 12 of them. I've got another one on the way, due in January. Henry closed the album and looked at Marcus. You want to know what I have? I have memories of a woman who loved me. I have 4 children who call me every week. I have 12 grandchildren who fight over who gets to stay at Grandpa's house. I have friends in my building who bring me soup when I'm sick. I have a church family who prays for me. I have a life full of people who know me, really know me, and love me anyway. Henry leaned forward. Now, I'm not rich. I worked as a janitor for 40 years. I live in this small apartment. I drive a 20-year-old car that makes funny noises. By the world's standards, I don't have much. But Mr. Wellington, I am the richest man I know because I have love. Real, true, deep love. And that's the only thing in this world that actually matters. Marcus stared at Henry, and something cracked open inside his chest. All his life, he thought success meant money, power, control, being on top, being feared, being the biggest, the strongest, the richest. But Henry had shown him a different kind of success. A success measured in moments instead of money, in relationships instead of revenue, in love instead of luxury. And Marcus realized he would trade everything he had ever owned, every $1 billion, every company, every achievement, for just one person to love him the way Grace had loved Henry. He typed on his phone, How do I start over? I don't know how to be a real person. Henry smiled. Well, that's why you're here, isn't it? You're taking the first step. You came looking for help. That takes courage, son. Real courage. What's the next step? The next step, Henry said, is we have dinner. I made beef stew this afternoon. There's plenty for two. And while we eat, I'll tell you about my life. The real parts. The hard parts. The parts that taught me what actually matters. And maybe, just maybe, you'll start to see that you're not as lost as you think you are. Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Just a tiny spark of it. Like a candle being lit in a dark room. He nodded. Henry stood up and walked to the kitchen. Oh, and Mr. Wellington, while you're here, you're going to help me cook. Because the first lesson I'm going to teach you is this. Real connection happens when we work together. When we serve each other. When we stop being bosses and employees, rich and poor, important and unimportant, and just become two humans making dinner together. Marcus stood up and followed Henry into the small kitchen. And for the first time in 30 years, Marcus Wellington didn't give orders. He didn't demand. He didn't control. He just listened. He helped. He learned. And in that tiny kitchen, in that small apartment, with an old janitor teaching him how to chop vegetables and stir stew, Marcus Wellington began the long, difficult, beautiful journey of becoming human again. 2 years later, Marcus Wellington pushed his cleaning cart down the hallway of the community center, whistling softly. His uniform was simple: gray pants, a blue shirt, comfortable shoes. His name tag said, Marcus, Custodial Staff. He stopped to clean a window and caught his reflection. He looked different now. His hair had gray in it. His face had wrinkles. But his eyes were different. Softer. Warmer. He looked like someone who smiled more than he frowned. Marcus! Hey, Marcus! A voice called from down the hall. He turned to see a group of kids running toward him. They were part of the after-school program he helped coordinate. Marcus had started volunteering at the community center a year ago, and somehow he'd become everyone's favorite helper. Are you still coming to my soccer game on Saturday? A little girl named Maria asked. Marcus had gotten his voice back after 6 months of therapy. It had been a long, difficult journey, learning to speak again. But now he smiled and said, "Wouldn't miss it for the world." The kids high-fived him and ran off to their next activity. Marcus went back to cleaning, and he realized something incredible. He was happy. Really, truly happy. After he lost Wellington Tech, Marcus had spent 2 years rebuilding his life from scratch. He sold most of his possessions. He moved out of the expensive penthouse and into a modest apartment. He declared bankruptcy because of all his debts. On paper, he had nothing. But in reality, he had everything. Henry had become his best friend. They had dinner together twice a week. Henry's family had welcomed Marcus into their lives like he was one of them. He went to birthday parties, graduations, and family barbecues. He learned people's names, their stories, their dreams. He reconnected with James, his old driver, and they met for coffee every Sunday morning. Marcus apologized for the way he had treated James all those years. James had forgiven him, and now they talked about real things, life things, human things. Marcus even reached out to David, his old assistant. He wrote David a letter apologizing for being such a terrible boss. David wrote back, and they started emailing. David was working at a different company now, much happier, and he told Marcus that even though those years were hard, they taught him how not to treat people when he became a manager someday. The community center job didn't pay much. Marcus made $15 an hour mopping floors and cleaning toilets. He would never be a billionaire again. He would never have a private elevator or a Rolls-Royce. He would probably never even own a house. But he had something infinitely more valuable. He had people who cared about him. He had a community. He had purpose. He had love. One day, Marcus saw a news report about Wellington Tech. Richard Chen, the man who had orchestrated his removal, had been caught embezzling millions of dollars from the company. He was arrested, and Wellington Tech's stock price crashed. The company was struggling, laying off thousands of employees. Marcus felt sad for all those people losing their jobs. But he didn't feel angry anymore. He didn't feel bitter or vengeful. He had learned that holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting someone else to die. That evening, Marcus went to dinner at Henry's apartment, like he did every Tuesday. Henry's daughter Ruth was there with her new baby, Henry's 13th grandchild, a little boy named Marcus Henry Okafor. "We named him after you and Dad," Ruth said, placing the baby in Marcus's arms, "because you both taught us what it means to be a good man." Marcus held the tiny baby, feeling the weight of this new life, this precious gift. Tears rolled down his face. Happy tears. This time. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for showing me what matters." Henry put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You did the hard work, son. You chose to change. You chose to become someone different. I just pointed the way. You walked the path." After dinner, Marcus and Henry sat on the small balcony, looking out at the city lights. It was the same view Marcus used to have from his penthouse, 50 stories up. But somehow, from Henry's second-floor balcony, the view seemed more beautiful. "Henry, can I ask you something?" Marcus said. "That day, in the elevator, 2 years ago, when you told me about the mountain of gold and the warm hands to hold, did you know I was about to lose everything?" Henry was quiet for a moment. "I didn't know for sure, but I could see it. I've lived long enough to recognize when someone is heading for a cliff. I could see you were lonely, Marcus, desperately lonely. And I hoped that if I planted a seed, maybe someday it would grow." "It did grow," Marcus said softly. "It saved my life." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out. And Marcus thought about how strange life was. How you could have everything and have nothing. How you could lose everything and gain everything. How the things that seemed most important turned out to be worthless, and the things that seemed worthless turned out to be priceless. He had been a billionaire CEO, powerful and feared. Now he was a janitor, humble and loved. And he knew, without any doubt, which version of himself was richer. This is the end of this story. Kindly like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories like this. Marcus Wellington had lost everything in silence: his voice, his company, his fortune, his power. But in that silence, in that loss, he found something he had been missing his entire life. He found connection. He found purpose. He found love. He found himself. And he learned that the janitor who showed him what mattered most wasn't teaching him something new. Henry was teaching him something ancient. Something that every religion, every philosophy, every grandmother has known since the beginning of time. That we are not measured by what we own, but by how we love. Not by what we achieve, but by who we become. Not by the height of our mountains, but by the warmth of the hands we hold. Marcus Wellington, the billionaire, had died that day in the conference room. But Marcus Wellington, the human being, had been born. And that person, broke, humble, and surrounded by people who truly cared about him, was finally, truly, completely rich.